the reality is that people's judgment is almost always based on radically ridiculous, incomplete information. And one of the things that I've seen with putting out video content, if you've seen any of my older stuff before I started to heal and tone things down and quit drinking and become a nicer person, I have a video, Seven Habits Highly Effective, 7 Keys to Raising Asshole Children and Other Things, and I've posted it on Facebook and posted little clips on TikTok. I don't know why I posted on TikTok, because I absolutely think that video is bullshit now. I would never post something like that again because I've had a change of heart. But one of the things that, I've posted stuff in the past that's been pretty edgy, and people will often respond to that. They'll look at that and they'll say something to me like, "You're an asshole." And I would always look at that and say, and just deconstruct it and say, that's super interesting that somebody would take one snippet of your life. They could see you in a 15-second segment in the store or in a wrong situation when you're giving your kids shit or something like that, and they are going to label you as being something that just encompasses your entire life. That person's an asshole. That guy's a shitty dad, so on and so forth. And when you look at that and just be as neutral as you can and see it for what it is, you realize that human judgment is ridiculous. I just want to share some stories and some experiences that I've had that I think will really help you, because I think one of the biggest hindrances for a lot of people, myself included, all of us, because we've all battled with insecurities. Insecurities is something to varying degrees that plagues every single one of us, and every single one of us who has really faced that thing, which I can't imagine there's not many of us who haven't really faced that to varying degrees. We know how awful it is. It's debilitating, it's paralyzing, and it's just cancer to your soul. It is something that, if you allow yourself to become motivated by it, I think it's something that can cause you to become a real monster. I think that some of the worst people in the world are people that never healed those insecurities and allowed them to fester into vengeance and vindictiveness, and has compelled them to do a lot of awful things. I see it in business all the time, because a lot of people in business are motivated by, let me put it this way to you. If you're at peace with yourself, do you really need to conquer the world? If you're at peace with yourself, do you really need to be better than anybody else? And in business, I just see that so often. And I don't know where the line is. I've just noticed that since I've started to heal and do this work, I don't have the need to build the biggest business in the world and whatever I'm working in, or be number one, or have all the external trophies of success at all anymore, at all. And it's like, having come out of that, I don't ever want to go back to that, ever. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't have some nice stuff, because I enjoy certain things, but there's a big difference between that and having it because you need to show off. And I think that a lot of the stuff we're seeing, particularly in the business world, there's so much nastiness and corruption and stuff that's just awful, that if we had a society that treated people like they had infinite and inalienable worth, we wouldn't be allowed to do a lot of the things that are happening. People in business would not be allowed to do a lot of the things that are happening. And why would they objectify another human being? I don't know. Maybe they don't understand their own value, but I've kind of digressed here on this. What I'm hoping to do is to give you some things that have helped me navigate judgment and be able to disarm it. Maybe not directly with people, but certainly within myself. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people say to you. You can't change how people are going to think about you. You can't change how they're going to judge you. Just like I was talking about earlier, you got somebody who will see 15 seconds of your life that is less than noble, and they will call you a piece of shit human being. That, to me, if you sit and analyze that, will tell you everything you need to understand about human judgment. For one thing, what somebody's seeing when they say that about you, they're seeing literally a fraction of an instance of an entire lifetime, and that's how easy they're going to come up with that judgment. You wouldn't see that kind of judgment occur in any other scenario and call that wise and prudent, or call that anything that's worth paying any attention to. And the other side of it is, I think the reality is, as a human being who struggled with insecurities as well, and who, if you look at some of my past stuff, it's like I loved shredding people. I think there's two reasons. I haven't really analyzed this, but I think there's two reasons why I love doing that back in the day. Because I had so much pent up agitation and frustration and anxiety because of a lot of the um, unprocessed trauma that was just eating me from the inside out. And that's something that's been proven, that people who have gone through those things, they tend to have, if the more unprocessed stuff you have and the more that you've suppressed it, the more that it manifests as this constant state of varying degrees of agitation and anxiety. And so that's going to have to be discharged. Like when you're uptight and frustrated, some people can handle it in different ways. Some people are way more calmer about it and will do it in more subtle ways. I tend to be more boisterous and have historically had a hard time hiding my emotions. Everybody's always said, you wear your emotions on your sleeve. Yeah, I do, for sure. Definitely getting a lot better because I'm relieving that underlying tension big time, so I don't have nearly as much of it. But it's going to want to be discharged. When you're feeling tense, you want to punch something. Maybe when somebody passes judgment on you, they're doing that because they need to offload that. And it has nothing to do with you. Honestly, I think that rarely it ever really has anything to do with you. And hopefully I'm going to get into this because breaking this down over the last, I've really worked hard, especially since about the age of 19 when I got into business for myself, probably even more so in school because I was always outspoken about stuff and rubbed people the wrong way frequently. And so people would say shit and I met the brunt of a lot of either undeserved and sometimes certainly deserved judgment from people. And so I've had to learn how to navigate that, especially from the age of 19 on. And so I just want to really break down some of this stuff because I think that it's such a liability to be so given to people's judgment and swayed by every single thing that they say to you. You may as well just be locked in a prison. And I believe it is something that anybody can work through and change. So please don't beat yourself up about it. It's just one of those things where you have an underlying belief system around something, and if you can change that and change how you see certain things, it'll by default change how you operate. And I just really want that for people because, we live in a society that's so brutal about throwing around judgment on the internet. It's just people will say things, myself included, to other people that they wouldn't say in person. And so it's super important, especially if you're dealing with addiction and you're dealing with issues around depression, anxiety, all that stuff, and then the downstream effects of that people are going to judge and condemn. You need to know how to navigate that. It's been a super important super important part of my toolkit over the last 2 years, and so that's why I want to share that with you. So I'm gonna back this up a little bit and just share with you some of the backstory with this, specifically what I'm talking about and thinking about. So back when COVID started to hit, I was watching this. I was at a really good place. I felt like I'd done a lot of work, changed a lot of perspectives, had certain experiences with certain medicines that really opened my eyes to the need for love and how love is so important, and that the things that are the opposite of that, judgment, hate, condemnation, disconnection, all those things are damn near the root, if not the root, of so much of our dysfunction, right? When we've been hurt in life, the worst hurts have almost always come from the loss of love, or from anything that there was a severing of love and connection with another person that we cared about. And then COVID started to hit. And I looked at things and was just kind of like, I don't really trust when there's a lot of money and power up for grabs. I have a really hard time not being cynical and trusting. And so when I see things like this happen, it's like Rahm Emanuel said years ago, never let a good crisis go to waste. And we're seeing some of that stuff happen. The talk of this great reset, I honestly at this point now, I'm just keeping my head out of it because it just never leads to anything good for me. But I started looking at this and be like, people, seriously, please, at least just please. It would be really nice if we could trust these people. I just don't think that we can. I think we need to have a little bit of skepticism as to what these people are up to. Because if you think that the people in the upper echelons of government and business are going to work to serve your needs every single day, and they obsess about bringing you value and helping you instead of enriching themselves and acquiring more power for themselves, I don't know how you fix that incredible naivete. I don't know, but and maybe I'm wrong, but I let that get under my skin. I can even feel it getting under my skin right now. And the last couple of days, I've seen it even with some of the additional lockdowns in our area, or restrictions and lockdowns in our area, and me being in the business that I'm seeing my clients suffer, and it pisses me off because I don't trust it 100%. But that's neither here nor there. I would love it if we could trust. That would be so amazing, right? It's a big problem to not be able to trust the people who are running this ship. But nonetheless, I continued to let it get under my skin. And the more that it was going, and I just thought this is going to pass, and then things just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then I was at this place kind of right back almost. I felt basically right back to where I'd used to be, where I just wanted to judge everybody. I wanted to lash out. I did. I mean, I'd go into the grocery store and I wouldn't be very nice to people if they gave me a reason not to be. And I'm not proud of that at all. I'm just saying where I'm at. And this is what I want to try to do with all this, this is where I'm at. We're all in this human journey. We've all got our shit. I'm okay with mine. I'm at peace with my stuff, regardless of whoever isn't. And I'm a work in progress, and I've come a long way, but I let that get to me. And that's a big reason why I took time off of doing TikTok videos and updating on YouTube, because I was just at this place where I was just irritated with the world and irritated with people, and I was very concerned about where things were going. And I just thought, I can't bring anybody any value when I'm like this, and I'm certainly not going to go in front of a camera and fake it, because that's just total bullshit, and I really wouldn't appreciate myself if I did. So I took time off, didn't post any content whatsoever. If you were watching my Instagram stories, you would have seen a whole shit ton of ranting and all that stuff. But then it got to be into summer. It kind of leveled off. I was still agitated and frustrated, but I spent a lot of time with my family this summer, went camping, just had a ton of great times that I haven't had. Never taken this much time with my family, and it's obviously because I was starting to change, and I'll get into some of those experiences in another video, because I think it'll really help some people. Because back in not this November of 2020, but November of 2019 was when I started working with somebody who is just an amazing man. He's a therapist who practices CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the struggles I talked about was that I have such a hard time shutting off and being present with my family. My mind's just always on work and productivity, and I always feel bad if I'm not doing something productive. And one of the things that he left me with in one of our last sessions together is he said, Jay, the most productive thing that you can do is spend quality time with your family. And I remember just looking at him, and he wasn't being harsh or anything, but I just remember looking at him and being like, isn't that crazy how that has to be drilled into my head? And he said, yeah, that's very common with a lot of men. But I remember just thinking about it over and over. The most productive thing that you can do is spend quality time with your family. And so that started to shift with some experiences that I had not too long after that last session. And so I started to spend more time with my family, and we spent more time out camping and all that stuff in the summer. And then I can't remember at what point in the summer, but I was sitting outside, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, all I want is peace of mind. Like, God, if you are there, if you exist, all I want is peace of mind. I don't need riches. I don't need any of this stuff, but I'm in this place where internally it's getting chaotic because I've allowed myself to get sucked into the political environment and the stuff that was happening with COVID, and then everything else. When you're in that state, it's like you see more things that cause you agitation and anxiety. And I remember this one day where I did feel these very few and far between moments of feeling like, wow, I feel peaceful right now. Like, I'd really rarely ever felt like that, which is why I think alcohol, a big contributor why alcohol became a big problem, because we don't function well when we're not at that place, at least to some extent on a regular basis. And I couldn't get there. But I just remember thinking, all I want is peace of mind. How do I get peace of mind? And it was probably like two or 3 weeks where I kind of kept repeating that to myself and pondering that and trying to figure this, how do I get peace of mind? And then it was, like I said, 2 to 3 weeks later, it was like that still silent voice inside of you said to me, you're never going to have peace of mind so long as you have ill will and judgment towards your fellow man. And that hit me, and I was just, it's one of those things where it hits and you're like, that is profoundly true. How can I ever expect to have peace of mind if I'm at war with everybody around me? And then I looked at it and I thought, well, how the hell do I undo this ill will towards certain people on the political spectrum that I absolutely despise? The kinds of people that think they're entitled to stuff, and the kinds of people that are smashing people's faces with bike locks because they don't like their political opinions. And same thing on both sides. I don't identify with either side anymore. I don't care. I don't want anything to do with it. I think politics, regardless, is super divisive, and I think that it's being used against us in a myriad of different ways. So I'm not trying to say that, but that's where I was at that point. And I remember just thinking about, like, how can I, like, I despise these people. I despise anybody who acts like a tyrant, no matter what side of the spectrum they are on, because I've studied history and it's fraught with examples of where that leads. And as I was thinking this over the next few weeks and trying to deconstruct it and make sense of it, like, how do I love these people? How do I get to a place of goodwill towards these people? And then I pictured one of them in their room, and I just had this picture come to mind, and I really don't believe it was something that originated from me. I think there's something beyond us, and we can tap into it. But this picture came to my mind of seeing one of those people in their bedroom crying because of how dark they feel and how lonely they feel, and because they were probably deeply traumatized, like a lot of us were. And that same still silent voice in me said, do you think that if you saw that person's whole story from the time they were little and saw the horrendous things that they went through and whatever it was that happened to them that planted that seed that never got healed, just like you, Jay, that caused you to become somebody who tended to operate in agitation and frustration and would happily lash out at people for various things because that was left unhealed? Do you think that you'd be able to judge them and condemn them? And it was just like, not a hope in hell. Because it's like when you get closer to people and you see their suffering and you understand them, it changes all that stuff. And so this answer came to me. The way for you to have goodwill towards all people is to understand them. Because if you understand the whole story, you can't judge them. And it's every single person that I've deployed that perspective with when I've started off at a place of judgment and condemnation and anything like that, when I've actually stopped and said, hold on a second, okay, let's look at this. Maybe they are doing that because they're a piece of shit human being and they're just awful, and that's just the way it is. They're just hell-bent on causing chaos, and, you know, as it says in the movie Batman, some men just love to watch the world burn. Maybe that's true. Let's put that on the table. Maybe that's true. But let's see some other alternatives here. Like, let's consider you for a second. Some people thought the same about you because you had no problem starting fights with people at all times. But now what I know about myself is that was fueled by this underlying agitation and angst that needed to be healed. The things that fueled that needed to be healed. Is it possible that that could be the exact same thing with these people? Do you think that when they were born and they were just this beautiful little baby, do you think that they were this awful, sociopathic, narcissistic person that's bent on evil? Or do you think that something happened to them along the way that caused them to go down that road? It was the same realization that I had months before through an experience with plant medicine. I'd be willing to bet that every single person that we call awful, even the worst of the worst, I bet you if we were able to actually look at their entire story and see the things that happened to them and see how they were not healed from those events and see how those things were the downstream consequences of that, we would understand that deep down they are hurting so bad. And another one of the principles with this is to help me to solidify that, because a lot of you, and some of you might be hearing this saying, yeah, but it doesn't make it okay. That was kind of what would be said inside of me too, because we're so conditioned with that. And I thought, well, yeah, it doesn't make it okay. Doesn't mean that I condone it. Doesn't mean when somebody does something awful that I can turn around and say, well, yeah, you went through all this shit, you're abused as a child and all these awful things, and therefore, yeah, that's okay that you're going to do that. It's like, no, that I don't condone that. It doesn't mean that that's okay or justified or excusable in any way. But I can understand why you would operate that way considering your circumstances. If every single one of us had all those same ingredients put into us, you look at a person's life as ingredients. If you had all those ingredients put into your story, do you really think that you wouldn't operate that way too? I don't think I would, because I've seen myself at my worst, and I've seen through this healing process of realizing that the reason that I'm so much different today than I was 2.5 years ago is because I've healed those things that happened in the past to varying degrees. I'm not totally there yet, but the essence of the healing has been changing the narrative around those things that were basically just a horrific assault on my sense of dignity and my sense of worth to the people that I love the most at an age when I had no capacity to do anything about it. And by virtue of doing that healing and having far less agitation, anxiety, it just naturally, I'm way more patient, I'm way more loving, I'm way more understanding, I'm way less snappy. I don't have to force it. It's just something that's there, and I believe that that's the case with every single person. And it's interesting to me that looking at that, the real transformation that happened with me in this was an experience that I had with a therapeutic experience that I had with LSD, where it was like my eyes were opened and I realized how important love was to everything. And it was like, I always say, it's like my heart was awakened to love for the first time in maybe since the time I was a little kid, when my heart closed because of all the shit that I went through. But it was from that this seed was planted, and it began to take root and start to take down these walls. And it's like I got this taste of love that I hadn't had as far as I can ever remember. This taste of love, like I just had this capacity to see everybody, see the good in everybody, and be able to love people and see that the reason you are the way that you are, that would cause me to judge and condemn you, or society would judge and condemn you, is you're broken, and you were broken in that way deep down at a young age, and that just doesn't go away. And so the more that I was able to do that and see people through the eyes of love, and therefore the less I was able to judge people, the happier I became, the more peace of mind that I had, and just the brighter everything got. I mean, there were days when I would feel so filled with that, and I wasn't under the influence of anything, but I was so filled with it. I remember sitting there and just looking out, from my backyard or driving, and just starting to cry because it was so moving to be able to experience this contrast between being at a place of harsh judgment and bitterness and resentment towards people and life itself, towards this place of being like, I feel like I now am equipped to be at peace with anybody. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, I get in difficult situations all the time where I get pissed off. I just had one this week, which I might talk about later, which was super fascinating. But it's like I now have there's this anchor point from which I can draw from, that has given me the tools when I do step into judgment. Because every single time I step into judgment with people and I start getting agitated and irritated and all that stuff, it's like darkness just sets in, and it doesn't take long for it to do so. And then it's like everything that I felt like I had grasped and took hold of was all of a sudden I'm lost. I feel like I'm walking in darkness now, and I have no way to get out. I have no understanding of how to get out of that. But the more that I look back at this and say, okay, where did you screw up? Where did you step into judgment towards somebody else? And I go back to that, and then I deconstruct the judgments that I had towards that person and start taking, okay, you had these same snap judgments I was talking about at the beginning of the video, where somebody says, you're an asshole because they saw a 15-second segment of your life in the parking lot. And that's what they conclude. It's like, well, I've done that countless times, and I did that in this scenario with this person. Okay, what could be the other alternative to that judgment that you came up with that person? They might have just got notice that their home is being foreclosed, or they lost their job, or who knows what, or they got cancer, or who knows what. I have no idea. Again, it doesn't make it okay for them to act the way that they did, but if I was in the same scenario, I would do the same, because I am a human being capable of the exact same stuff. And anybody who's ever walked any amount of time with me in my life could vouch for that. And so it started to undo the judgment that I had towards that person. And then by virtue of doing that, the darkness started to lift. And I can tell you that it's happened Every single time. There hasn't been a time when that hasn't happened. Now, maybe there's some other things in my life that are causing me stress and frustration and all that. But it would be, I've seen it consistently that very thing is the thing that caused things to get dark in the first place. And I think there's such a deep principle to that. I think that, there's so many different spiritual disciplines that will say, as you judge others, so too shall you be judged. And I think there's something to that where it's like we will judge ourselves, because I've seen that the more that I'm walking in a place of non-judgment towards other people, the more that I have mercy and grace and compassion and empathy, the harder it is for me to judge myself. And like all of us know, when we are judging and condemning ourselves, those are some of the most darkest times, if not the most darkest times, because there's nothing worse than hating yourself. I can't imagine, and this is another thing I've been wrestling with, like what worse thing is there to be plagued with than a strong sense of self-hate? And that's why would you judge yourself? Because you hate yourself. And so this principle started to show up for me that just kept being repeated inside to me somehow, that judgment is the seed to hate. And if you hate, you're going to be miserable. And that understanding is the doorway to love and acceptance for all people. And if you talk to people who work with the worst of the, people that our society just completely trashes, homeless addicts, they'll tell you, listen to Gabor Mate, 12 years of working in Vancouver's Lower East Side, the most concentrated place of injection users anywhere in North America. And he says there hasn't been one single time that he can recall in working with the addicted population there where the women haven't been sexually abused and men haven't undergone serious psychological, emotional, and or physical abuse as a child. What does that do to, what do those things do to you? They are a horrific, especially to a child, a horrific denigration and trashing of your sense of dignity and self-worth. And we've a lot of us have lost that along the way, and we've been trying to get it back ever since. A lot of people, I've heard this when they talk about heroin use, they say the first time they used heroin, it was like the warmest, loving hug they've ever had in their life. Is that wrong for people to want to have that? We are a social species. Love to us is like oxygen to our soul. And if we don't have that, we are going to dysfunction and fall apart in horrendous ways. All of that's kind of a roundabout way of trying to say that the lesson that I've learned, and I'm not trying to sit here and act like I'm some sage or authority by any stretch whatsoever, but it's been unequivocally true for me, and a lot of people that I've talked with about that have had similar experiences to this, that if we judge other people, we open ourselves up to judgment. And I've seen that it's like it's a perfect ratio. To the extent that I'm going down this road of judgment towards others is the scope to which I'm going to judge myself. And the scope to which I'm going to judge myself and not have mercy and empathy and compassion towards myself and understanding is the length to which I'm going to fall into this trap of hating myself. And there's nothing more miserable than that. You can have everything good going for you on the outside, but if internally you hate yourself and you can't accept yourself and nothing's ever good enough and you're never at peace with yourself, you are among the most fucking poor people on the face of this earth. And we've all seen that. And how can it not be? What is a worse affliction than to hate oneself? I guess we'll say principle one, if you're going to judge others, you're going to judge yourself. You won't be able to escape that. That's a hypothesis on my behalf. I'm not trying to state that that's just for me. And I go back to it every time. When I get into this place of darkness, and I'm feeling agitation again and all that stuff, because the more that I go down that road, I'm frustrated by things. It's been such a habitual thing for me in my life, I think fueled by that underlying anxiety or the agitation and anxiety from the unhealed stuff. But now that that's gone, it's like it's so much easier just to get back to a good baseline. But when I get into that place, I go back and I look, where did I step off this path? Who did I start to condemn and judge and despise? I go back there. I look at how I judge them. I put it on the table. Say, Kate, that could be true. What other alternative explanations are there? And then as I start to explore those explanations, it's like, yeah, that's probably true, because that was always true in my life. I didn't just set out to be an asshole to people. There's a reason that I would do that. And how can that not be any different for them? And then when I would do that, the darkness would start to lift. And it's happened every single time. There's somebody who's really close to me, very, very close, among the closest people to me. I'm not going to say their name or their relationship because I want to honor everybody involved, and I don't want that to, I'm not trying to publicly expose what's happening here, even though out of frustration sometimes I wanted to, no question about that, because I want to destroy the person who was hurting this person. But I do love both of them. And anyways, this person is leaving a 10 plus year relationship that was just pure chaos and tumultuous and awful to watch them go through it. And their spouse, due to their own pain and unhealed wounds, operated in a way that was very narcissistic and emotionally abusive. And I've seen the carnage that this has brought onto this person that I'm very close with. And the other day I was talking with her for a couple hours on the phone, and she was just in utter despair. And any woman who's gone through, seeing this close up has just blown my mind to how immense the devastation is from emotional abuse. In fact, I was talking with her counselor a few months ago, before we were going out there to help her move and stuff like that, because I'm very close to her and was going to be involved in helping in this situation. And she said to me, you have to understand that women who are going through this, there's often a far more psychological damage to women who have gone through emotional and psychological abuse and verbal abuse than physical abuse. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah, because oftentimes, and she said, in the context of the physical abuse happens, the guy goes to jail, it's over. She said, because every single day they're constantly just waiting for this threat. They're just on edge all the time, waiting for something to happen. And it was just like, that makes a lot of sense, because this person that actually said to me, I just wish he'd come beat the shit out of me and get it over with. And she'd say that numerous times, and it made so much sense. And it was just such an eye-opener to how much damage this causes. But the other day, I was on the phone with her, helping her to regain her power in the situation, because she'd given it back. She'd kind of gone back and come under this guy again. And listening to the things that were revealed to me, and because I love this person so much, by the end of the day, I literally was ready to just fucking unleash hell on him and his family, because they're enabling it, and just there's a bunch of different things. But I was so fucking mad, and I was ready to drop the mother of all bombs, because I'd sat back and been as patient as I possibly can and tried to understand this stuff. And interestingly enough, and I've been doing really well for a long time up to that point. And when you're angry and ready in that, and I think there's probably something that happened beforehand that got me agitated, and this got me fired up. And then, like, when you're in that state, you kind of feel good in a perverse way. You certainly don't feel depressed. I woke up the next day and I felt disgusting. I felt depressed. I felt deflated. I felt like just dead inside. And I didn't put two and two together. And then I got into my office, and I had this major issue with Google. Google can be, from a business standpoint, could be a real pain in the ass to work with. I'm sorry, Google. I know this is your thing, but you've got to get some of this stuff straight, because it's absolutely agitating. And man, I flipped my frickin' lid. And I was sitting there, I'm like, why do I feel this dark? I haven't felt like this in a long time. And then, like, I just flipped my I just absolutely wanted to punch something. Like I haven't flipped out in this bad in a long time around with something like this. And then later on that evening, I was thinking about this person's ex-husband, the abuser, and his story about the things he'd gone through as a child were absolutely devastating. And his parents basically told him to shove it. Don't tell anybody about this. Didn't happen. We're not trashing the family name. So this little kid, from I think the age of 2 to 4, had to carry unimaginable amount of suffering because of something that happened to him, which was a complete destruction to his sense of dignity and self-worth. And I can see, because I've known him for a long time, and he's somebody I do love very much, and I want the best for him. But I was picturing this again and thinking, I just thought to him, I thought to myself and to him, in a way. Have you ever actually sat and thought about what that must have been like for that little kid? Because I know, thinking about the abuse that I went through and the horrific things that I witnessed and experienced as a kid, when I heard about it, I was just like, oh yeah, that's crazy. Had no idea. Didn't remember that. No recollection of it. Interesting. Cool. Not going to go there. It's not going to matter. That happened in the past. I'm not going to sit here and stew on it. I'm not going to ruminate on it. I'm not going to get myself sucked into complaining about it or blaming my life situation for it. But now, considering what I know now, I look back. I've done this process. Look back and then just said, okay, what happened in the mind of that 18-month-old Jay when that shit happened? What happened at 3 years old when I witnessed my dad throw my mom down the stairs and smash her face on the mirror at the bottom of the stairs and bust her face open and see my mom's blood-covered face? What did that do to that kid? What beliefs? Because our minds are constantly making meaning and establishing meaning around things, and then that meaning becomes the filter through which we see further events. How badly did that shatter my mind that this world is a safe and positive and hopeful and optimistic place? How many seeds were planted there that caused the downstream pessimism and viewpoint of this world that this is just a hopeless, awful place that would come up from time to time? And then finding my dad dead at 16 and how much that fueled that even more, unbeknownst to me, because I always thought I dealt with it really well. How is that any different for him? He hasn't healed from this. And how do you, you can't just be like, get healed. Like it's such a complex process. But when I started to think about this event in that light, and I started to think about him in that light, instantly the judgment and hate, again, it is not a signing off on what he's done. There's nothing of that means it's okay or justified or excusable. It just means it changes the foundation from being he's a shitty, awful human being to he is a deeply wounded, hurt person who hasn't healed this. And if he could heal it, he will be made whole. And this will lead, he will not operate in this anymore. I'm 100% convinced of that. And when I thought about that, I actually broke down talking about it with my wife, Jill, and she's like, I've always seen in him that he's carries this sadness, and yet underneath this, he is somebody who's so full of love and just wants to be loved like everybody else. And as soon as I had that shift in my perspective towards him, the darkness just left. And in that instance, it was so fast, because earlier in the day, it was just dark and awful, and I just was ready to just unleash hell on anybody. And I didn't even clue into it. And then as soon as I started to think those thoughts towards him, the darkness just left, and it felt like love filled my soul again. And it was just, like I said to my wife, I'm like, that is absolutely the case of what happened there. There's no question about it, because I saw the contrast. Usually when we go through these things, it vacillates kind of slowly, right? Like you feel agitated and frustrated and dark, and then it kind of slowly ebbs and flows. But this was like instantly. Here's an instant line of demarcation between feeling dark and depressed and angry and agitated to being just it all just blown away. And I looked at that and said, that's exactly why that was. Just like so many other times when I've gone back and dealt with this stuff, this was so fast. It wasn't days later. It was so fast that the contrast was literally like being in ice water and then jumping into a nice warm bath. You feel that contrast, and it immediately exposed what was happening there. That the reason that I got into that dark place was because of the fact that I'd fallen into judgment and anger towards him, and that darkened my soul for like I believe there's a spiritual realm. I'd be so curious to see what that looked like. And it's like that to me was an exposing of what happened in that context, because I felt infinitely better afterwards. All the darkness had left, and it hasn't come back since. And that was a few days ago. So I share that with you because I think that that's job number one, honestly. I've been very good at deflecting judgment and deconstructing judgment, but I still was never at a place where I really, really, really was at peace with myself to the extent that I am now. And I think that I'll look back in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years from now and be like, you don't know what peace with yourself is, because I'll continue to progress down that road. But It's crystal clear to me now that job one is to not judge other people, and the only way to not judge other people, and you have to battle with the normal human propensity for us to want to judge people, to either discharge our own frustration and angst and irritation and agitation, and B, we have a perverse need to judge other people in order to feel better about ourselves. That's something every single one of us struggles with. And so you have to reckon with that and look at it and say, okay, I'm going to put down my sword on this one, because I would much rather have peace of mind and be at peace with other people than to be at war with everybody and therefore be at war with myself. And when you start to ease the judgments through the use of understanding and looking at things, when something happens to you, it's going to take a process. This was not instantaneous for me whatsoever. I'm continually getting better and better and better and better at this, faster and faster. And I'm getting to a place where I can see triggers that normally would set me right off, and I'm just like, instantly. It's like, I wonder what they're going through. I wonder what happened to them. And it's just like, honestly, it's just like this breath of fresh air that just comes into you. I'm so grateful that I'm not sucked into this anymore, because that was fucking hell. If we are at war with others, we will be at war with ourselves. There is no other option. There's no other way. And so the antidote, like I said when I went through that process, if I just want peace of mind, how do I get there? 3 weeks later, I get this answer. How can you expect to have peace of mind if you're at war with everybody else? How can you expect to have peace of mind if you have ill will towards your fellow man? Just like, that's interesting. Why am I at war with my fellow man? Why do I have this ill will towards certain people? Because you've judged them and you've condemned them. Oh yeah, our human judgment is so utterly ridiculous. So let's deconstruct it, because I'd rather have peace of mind than be right in this situation. And I started to look at those people and I thought, I can only imagine what they've gone through. The conversations that I've had with endless people over the last 2 years, and seeing the battle that people are going through in ways that nobody else has been exposed to, because I've oftentimes been the only person that people have ever opened up to ever in their life. And it's like, I guarantee you that these people that I'm judging are no different than this. And they are fighting a battle that none of us know anything about. And if we could see the battle that was raging on inside of them, they would be very hard to judge. And so understanding and the empathy and compassion that comes from understanding is the antidote to judgment and the way towards love. And if you love people, how can you not have peace of mind? And I've seen that. If 2 years ago somebody would be telling me I'd be talking like this, I'd be like, some hippy dippy shit there, Jay. But I'm telling you, it's made life exponentially better. I would never want to go back to the way that I was, ever. And when I do go back to that, in periodic slip-ups, it's like, fuck me, this is awful. And I lived like this all the time. Awful. Absolute. It's hell. It's literally like hell. It's just awful. And anybody who's been there knows what that's like. If we judge others, we will judge ourselves. And by the standard with which we judge others is the standard to which we will judge ourselves. And there's nothing worse than hating yourself. So if you want to stop hating yourself, we have to stop hating other people. And the only way to stop hating other people is to sit down, put down your sword, stop seeking after the need to feel better about yourself by making other people feel shit, because it doesn't work. It works for a moment, just like alcohol feels good for the moment, but you pay for it majorly down the road. Deal with your own internal agitation and don't fuel it by hating other people. Be willing to look at people and say, I wonder what the alternative. Here's what I judge. Here's what I think. This person's an asshole. They did this. Okay, let's put that on the table. What's another option? Maybe they went through something awful and they reacted just like I did, and this has nothing to do with me. Imagine I could sit with them and hear their story. What do you think I would do? Would I continue to judge them? I don't think so. And as soon as you do that, it starts to dissipate. And then in comes the capacity to have empathy and compassion for them, and the darkness starts to lift. It's happened every single time with me and with every single person that I've talked to about this. I don't think it's any coincidence that depression and anxiety and these things are happening and increasing at exponential rates. And yet We are becoming a society that is becoming exponentially more judgmental, it seems. And outwardly so because of the internet. And me, I'm telling you, I was on the forefront of that. You just have to go watch some of my videos from a few years ago and talk to anybody who knew me. I loved shredding people because I had so much internal agitation and angst and frustration that it had to be discharged, and that was the way that I would do it. And probably because there was so much unhealed stuff that fueled insecurities that if I could make somebody feel like shit about themselves, it would make me feel better about myself, just like every single one of us is guilty of doing from time to time. So I can tell you, as somebody who walked in that consistently, that the difference between doing so and where I'm at now, fueled by the fact that I've healed, right? If I tried to force myself to be nice and all that stuff back then when there was just this raging cauldron of unresolved shit that I had never dealt with for decades that was fueling that, it would have been just this battle against the desire to rip somebody's face off. But it's like by virtue of the fact that I cleaned some of those things up and made sense of them and was able to properly let it go and leave it in the past, it was because of that I've been able to operate from a place of peace, and therefore it's much easier to be loving and kind and compassionate and understanding and empathetic. And to the extent that I walk in that, the better life is without question. I would never want to return to how I used to live, ever. It was miserable. And anybody who's come out of that and anybody who's living like that, and unfortunately with the current environment of what's happening, a lot of people are falling into it, and I understand it. But if we want to have peace of mind, which matters more than anything else, if you don't have peace of mind, what do you have? You have nothing. Imagine having everything in the world, anything you want from a materialistic standpoint, anything, and not having peace of mind. All that stuff would be nothing but trash because it wouldn't take that pain away. So if we don't have peace of mind, if we hate ourselves, we're going to be living in misery. And I do believe, looking at my own experiences again and talking to people all over the place about this for definitely the last year, and hearing other people say the same thing who've kind of gone down similar journeys, very prominent people, and say like, yeah, when I was able to let go of my judgment towards other people, things got brighter. More than almost anything. And I would say that that's absolutely been the case. So my suggestion to you, my unprofessional amateur opinion and suggestion to you would be that if you are struggling with being overcome with the judgment of other people and you want to be able to learn how to neutralize it, this is a good place to start. Take inventory of how much you are judging other people. Like really start to become aware, because a lot of times we're actually just not aware. One of the things that's so eye-opening to me about this process is how utterly disconnected I was from my own internal state and what was happening up here. But when I started to take inventory of it, and you kind of get it on paper, or you at least make a mental note of it and say, I just judged that person. Why was that? What's happening inside of me? Do I feel agitated and anxious? And I just looking to discharge that? Do I feel like shit about myself and I'm looking to feel better about myself? And don't shit on yourself about it. It's like, this is what humans do who are hurting. It's okay. All of us do it. Every single one of us do that. So don't shit kick yourself, because you will never look at yourself. You'll never be able to take an honest look at yourself in the way that's going to start to produce change if what you see is going to cause you to hate yourself. And so you have to use what Gabor Mate talks about, compassion inquiry. It's to be like, oh, why did I do that? I'm such a piece of shit. And say, I wonder, why did I do that? What was happening inside of me at that moment? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What triggered that? Was it insecurity? Was it something that hurt me? What was that? And you begin to look at that from that perspective. You're not going to hate yourself for it, right? It's the exact same thing. Judgment is always the seed of hate. And the antidote to judgment and hate is understanding, which leads to empathy and compassion, which cannot not lead to love. And the same is true for ourselves. So take note of that. When people judge you, learn how to look at it and say, one of the things I used to do when people judge me is say, yeah, what I did was an asshole move. Yeah, for sure. That was a dick face thing to do. That doesn't mean I'm a dick face, because the people that are closest to me and the people that I've helped, even before I started to heal, people knew that I cared, and they knew that I would do anything for any one of them. And I was still actually one of the few people, if not the only people, that a lot of people turn to talk to all through my life. And it's like, so I'm also have the capacity to be a nice guy. What's the difference between the two? Is it that I'm just an asshole and that's it? And you're condemned to being an asshole? No. It's something happening deeper beneath the surface, and that type of behavior is a symptom of something. And if I can get to the root of it, instead of fighting symptoms, so many people are doing this behavior modification shit where their internal state is one where they can't help but lash out in various different ways and operate in ways that are self-destructive and destructive to themselves and others, without ever getting to the root and starting to work on what's the internal state and why. And I can promise you, again, for the 19th time today, and I'm going to continue to repeat this over and over again, because I do see so many people who are trying to do this behavior management shit and it doesn't work. You start to clean up the inside stuff. Start to say, why do I feel like this? And then you start to realize it has to do with a shit ton of unresolved problems that stacked up over the years that were left unresolved. And if I start to clean those up, they're going to be properly left in the past where they belong. And it's not going to irritate me. Just like when you have a problem that comes across your desk. If you just take it and put it out of your mind, but you know it's something that has to be dealt with, it's going to cause agitation and anxiety. The same is true for things that happen to you that you did not master. You know at some deeper part of your entire being that if you were faced with that event again, because the last time you faced it, it mastered you, it conquered you. If you don't figure out how it is that you can prevent yourself from being made vulnerable in the future, and then changing the narrative that those events cause so you can leave it in the past and dismantle the carnage that they cause in terms of how you saw yourself, other people in the world, it's going to cause agitation and anxiety. No question about it. I think everybody who hears that knows that that makes sense. So you start to deal with those things from the past. They start to resolve. That stack of problems you have gets smaller and smaller, just like it does in practical, physical, real life. You start to feel better. You therefore start to act better without having to force it. I hope that helps you. Please let me know in the comments if it does. Feel free to reach out. I'm super active on TikTok again for the time being, on Instagram as well with Instagram stories. I love posting stuff a lot on there. So if you want to keep in touch, let's connect on TikTok, on Instagram. Please let me know what your thoughts were. What spoke to you in this in the comments. You can let me know, please, what I should correct or any constructive criticism you have. I'm totally open to that. It takes me a lot to get offended. So please don't worry about that. I just want to help people. And if you have any feedback on how I can do a better job at helping people, that would be much appreciated. So please make sure that you subscribe, share this with anybody who it would be of benefit to. Like it because it helps it get seen more, and throw a comment down there, even if it's just love it, appreciate it, or you suck. Either one I'm okay with. Appreciate it all. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast. The link is going to be in the description below. And much love to you guys. I'm loving the feedback, and I'm loving this journey, and it's such a privilege and an honor to be able to share whatever it would be. And oftentimes that's just my own struggles that could be the most benefit to other people, so that they realize they aren't alone. And it's such a privilege to be able to do so and to share the things that have helped me. I don't have all the answers. I'm certainly never going to pretend like I have all the answers, and I hope that I don't come across that way. But I have spent a shit ton of time and energy working through these things to make sense of them in the last 2 years, and I'm just getting started. I got a long ways to go, but if somebody would have told me even a year and a bit ago that I would be where I am today, I would have been like, that's crazy. That's completely unfathomable, because there were so many times where it was like, this is so dark and this is awful and I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this, and it just feels like such a ginormous problem that frankly, I don't think I can solve this. And it got pretty bleak at times. And so if I can do it, you can too. And I'm desperate to be able to share the things that have worked with me and share the struggles that I have, so that you don't shit kick yourself. Because when you realize it's not you, this is what happens to this machine and to us and to our being when these ingredients get added to it. It is what it is. It's not an excuse. It's a call to look at it from the right perspective so you can properly understand it. Just like Albert Einstein had allegedly said, if I'm faced with a problem and I'm given 1 hour to solve that problem, I will spend 55 minutes of that time, of that 1 hour, defining and understanding the problem. Because if you don't properly understand it, if you come from the place that you're just a shitty piece of shit human being, you have no hope of ever changing that. Zero. and you will descend into self-destruction real fast. But if it's like if you start to see and understand that this is rooted in the trauma, this is rooted in years and years and years and years of things that I've just suppressed and not properly dealt with that can't not cause agitation and anxiety, that's a much different place to start from than the one that leaves you in nothing but a place of hopelessness because it's condemnatory. Highly recommend getting yourself a copy of the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. That book has been instrumental in helping me to understand how these things work. It's probably the most important book in the area of dealing with trauma and healing. The guy was, I think, he was the head or close to the head of the National Institute of Mental Health. He's a serious scientist talking about serious stuff. Not that I think that that's the only answer, but for me, I tend to veer more that direction. So I'm looking for things that are validated because there is so much crazy stuff out there that it's, you can get led astray real easy. But he talks about all the things that they've done in terms of studies that have shown that, for instance, people that have been traumatized as kids, their brains are fundamentally different in a lot of different ways. Their stress hormones, the part of their brain that manages stress. And it's like when you realize that, it just is like, okay, I'm not a piece of shit. This is where I start to fix this. And it can start to be dealt with in a myriad of different ways. And that book is loaded with very potent treatment options that some of them have been incredibly helpful for me. EMDR, and I would be lying through my teeth if I didn't say that the therapeutic use of psychedelics in the right context and therapeutically with the intent to go inside and face whatever comes up has, without question, I would not be where I am today without those experiences. And I'm not at all, I'm going to throw a caveat out there. Don't go and frivolously try these things at home, because I'm telling you, this is what happens with people. When people really hurt themselves with these substances, it's because you may encounter something, all this stuff that you've been trying to run away from and suppress over the years, it may all come up and you don't have a hope in hell of escaping it. In fact, the harder you run from it, the bigger and badder it's going to get, and you are locked into this room with it. So unless you're prepared to do that, I would highly encourage you. I spent 1.5 years, 2 years of researching these things before I started to engage with them. But there's no question that they were not profoundly helpful for me. In fact, the experience that I mentioned with LSD, small dose of LSD, was what planted the seed that has caused this entire thing to blow wide open for me. I hope this has been helpful. Catch you on the next one. Please leave a comment, subscribe, like, share this with somebody. Subscribe to the podcast. Catch up with me on TikTok if you're on there, and Instagram. And we'll chat with you soon.